I remember the exact moment she told me we lost the baby. Clover was curled up on the bathroom floor, mascara smeared, cheeks blotchy, a trembling hand pressed over her mouth. "I'm so sorry, Lennox," she sobbed. "It just happened. I started bleeding, and She couldn't finish the sentence. I dropped to my knees beside her, held her like she was made of glass, and told her over and over again that none of this was her fault. I was devastated, gutted. I'd never imagined myself as a dad before, but once she said she was pregnant, something inside me shifted. I started reading baby books, budgeting for a nursery, watching YouTube videos on how to swaddle a newborn. I'd even picked out a name, Ellis, whether it was a boy or girl. And then, just like that, it was over. At least, that's what I thought. The next few days were a blur of soft words and silent meals. I brought her tea, ran her baths. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to reopen a wound. But the silence between us grew louder. She started hiding her phone, staying out late. And whenever I offered to drive her to a follow-up appointment, she'd flinch like I'd just asked to read her diary. Then, one morning, I found her on the couch, staring blankly at a movie she wasn't watching. I sat beside her, touched her hand, and said, "Maybe I could call the hospital, just to check in." Her reaction was instant, wild-eyed panic. She snatched her hand away like I'd burned her. "Don't," she snapped. "Please, Lennox, don't call them. I don't want to relive it, okay?" I nodded, but my gut twisted. Something didn't feel right. I tried to brush it off, told myself grief looks different for everyone. That night, I didn't sleep. My brain gnawed on the same thought until I gave in. I called the hospital, and the voice on the other end of the line said words that made my blood turn cold. "We haven't had a patient by that name in over 2 months." "What do you mean, 2 months?" Clover had told me she was just there last week. And that's when everything started to unravel. I hung up the phone, hands shaking, heart pounding like it wanted out of my chest. My first instinct was denial. Maybe they checked the wrong records, right? Maybe Clover used her maiden name. But even as I tried to rationalize it, I knew deep down she had lied. And she lied with the kind of conviction that made me feel guilty for doubting her. I didn't confront her right away. No, I needed proof. Cold, undeniable truth. So I did something I'm not proud of. I snooped. She kept her purse under the bed, always zipped, always out of reach. But that night, while she was in the shower humming along to some indie band like she hadn't broken my world, I slid it out and opened it with trembling fingers. There it was, a crumpled receipt from some downtown clinic. Not a hospital, not even a general doctor's office. It was stamped with the words, "Voluntary termination, 9 weeks. Paid in full." But what really made my stomach flip? The payment was made on someone else's card. A name I didn't recognize, Zayden Lockwood. I just stared at the receipt, numb. Everything blurred. The walls, the floor, her voice still echoing from the shower. Suddenly, her miscarriage wasn't a tragic accident. It was a decision, a secret, and worst of all, a cover-up. She didn't lose our baby. She killed a baby that wasn't even mine. I sat on the edge of the bed, the paper clutched so tight in my fist it tore down the middle. My mind raced. Who was Zayden? A coworker? A friend? A one-night stand? All I knew was this. My wife had gone to a clinic behind my back, paid for an abortion using another man's credit card, and then staged a sobbing performance worthy of an Oscar just to keep me in the dark. When she stepped out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel, smelling like vanilla and lies, I couldn't even look at her. "Everything okay?" she asked, cocking her head. I forced a nod. "Yeah, just tired." I didn't sleep that night. I just stared at the ceiling, listening to her breathe beside me, wondering how long she'd been pretending, wondering how many other things I didn't know. But one thing was crystal clear now. I wasn't just grieving a child that never was. I was mourning a marriage that never really existed. The name Zayden Lockwood haunted me. It rolled through my head like static on an empty radio station, buzzing louder the more I tried to ignore it. Who was he? How close did he have to be for her to not just carry his child, but to kill it and hide it from me? I had to know. I took a day off work and sat in my car in the parking lot outside her office building. Clover worked as a marketing consultant for a mid-sized design firm. Fancy titles, open floor plans, the kind of place where people drink overpriced lattes and wear sneakers with suits. For 2 hours I sat there, watching faces come and go. Then I saw him. I didn't know it was him at first. But when Clover came outside with this tall, smug-looking guy in a dark olive trench coat and laughed, like nothing in the world was wrong, I felt it in my gut. That was him. She touched his arm in that way women do when they think no one is watching. Like a whisper that says, "We have a secret." I took a picture. Then another. My hands were shaking, but I made sure to get his face. Later, I reverse searched it. I don't even know how I managed. I'm not a tech guy. But I found him. Zayden Lockwood. Senior brand director. Unmarried. Recently relocated from Austin. No kids. No criminal record. And now? Apparently, no shame. It was like a punch in the lungs. My wife hadn't just cheated on me. She'd nested this whole thing. Planned it. Built it like a quiet war behind my back. What got me the most was how clean he looked. Polished. Confident. The kind of guy you see in a commercial drinking bourbon in a leather chair while his perfect life unfolds in slow motion. Not someone you'd expect to destroy a marriage. But maybe that was the point. Clover always said I was too safe. That I needed more spark. I used to think it was a joke. But now it sounded like foreshadowing. That night, I didn't mention the name. I just watched her. Watched the way she lied with her eyes. Watched her smile at me across the table like she hadn't just blown our life to pieces. "You've been quiet lately," she said. "I'm tired." "You're always tired. And you're always gone," I snapped. The words were out before I could stop them. She froze. Just for a second. Then her voice softened. "You're still hurting," she whispered, reaching across the table. "I get it. The baby." "Don't." I cut her off. "Please don't bring it up like you care." Her eyes widened, and for a second, just a flicker, I thought I saw it. Guilt. Fear. Something real. But then she blinked, smiled, and changed the subject like nothing had happened. And I sat there pretending, too. Pretending I hadn't already started printing copies of that clinic receipt. Pretending I didn't already have a plan. I don't know when exactly I crossed the line from broken-hearted husband to silent investigator. Maybe it was when I realized she'd never tell the truth. Maybe it was when I saw her hand on Zayden's arm and understood she'd moved on long before I ever suspected a thing. Whatever the reason, something inside me snapped. I stopped asking questions. I stopped begging for scraps of honesty. I started collecting evidence. The first thing I bought was a voice recorder. Nothing fancy. Just a tiny black device I could slip under the couch cushion or behind the picture frame in the hallway. I wasn't looking for a smoking gun. I just wanted her voice. I needed to hear what she said when I wasn't around. I needed to know if I was crazy, or if the woman I loved was truly gone. It didn't take long. 3 days after I planted the recorder in the living room, I caught her on the phone, laughing. Flirtatious. Comfortable in her deceit. "No, he doesn't know a thing. He still thinks it was a miscarriage." "Yeah." I told him. It tore me apart. You should have seen his face. My stomach flipped. I paused the playback. Rewound. Played it again. And again. Just to be sure. She was talking to him. And not only that, she mocked me. My grief. My trust. She made it into a joke, a punchline for her lover. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, earbuds in, listening to her peel off pieces of me like I was nothing but a coat she outgrew. I started recording every day. I started documenting everything. Her receipts, her late-night outings, even the missed calls from MD Lockwood, Zayden's initials, cleverly disguised. She had no idea. I even tested her. One night, I made us dinner, her favorite, spinach ravioli with lemon butter, and brought up the hospital again, gently. "I wish I'd been there with you," I said, stirring my wine. When it happened, her eyes flicked to mine. Just for a second. "You were," she said. "In spirit." "In spirit," I repeated, smiling like a fool. "Did they say anything? You know, about complications or future chances?" She hesitated. "Honestly," she said, sipping her wine, "it was all such a blur. I just want to forget it." And there it was again. The lie. Smooth. Practiced. So convincing that if I didn't already know the truth, I would have bought every word. But I didn't know. And now, I had her voice on tape, admitting everything. You'd think that would be enough, right? Proof. Betrayal. A reason to leave. But I wasn't ready yet. Not because I still loved her, but because I needed her to feel it. Not the way I did, no. That kind of pain is too deep, too personal. I needed her to feel exposed. Like I did when I stared at that ultrasound photo with tears in my eyes, dreaming of a future she never planned to give me. So I kept recording. And I kept pretending. Because the storm I was building, she wouldn't hear it coming. Clover's birthday was coming up. Normally, I'd planned something sweet and sentimental, a handwritten letter, a reservation at that rooftop place she liked, maybe a necklace with a tiny charm that meant something only to us. But this year, I had something very different in mind. I still went through the motions, of course. I wrapped a box in pale silver paper, tied it with a blue ribbon. I even wrote a card that said, "To the love of my life. Here's to the next chapter." And that wasn't even a lie. The chapter was coming. But she wasn't going to like how it ended. See, inside that beautifully wrapped box wasn't jewelry or perfume. It was a flash drive. A tiny one. Black, smooth, innocuous. But it held everything. Her phone calls, her lies, even photos of her and Zayden that I'd taken myself. And one special surprise. An audio file I titled Spirit Baby. That was the one where she laughed about faking a miscarriage. It was all neatly labeled, organized, irrefutable. And my plan? Simple. I was going to gift it to her at the family dinner she insisted on hosting. For appearances, of course. Her parents, her sister, a few close friends. I'd play the doting husband until dessert. Then I'd hand her the box in front of everyone. I fantasized about it in detail. The way her hands would shake. The way the room would fall silent as they listened. The way her mother's face would drain of color, and her sister, who always thought I wasn't ambitious enough, would stare, wide-eyed and speechless. But the thing about revenge? It gets messy. And Clover, as cruel and manipulative as she was, wasn't stupid. 2 nights before her birthday, I caught her in my office. She said she was looking for a stamp. But I'd seen the drawer she was in, the locked one. The one that held copies of the receipt and a backup recorder. She was getting suspicious. So I changed tactics. I needed the element of surprise. I canceled the party reservation she didn't know I made. Told her her favorite restaurant was overbooked and offered to host a quiet night at home instead. She liked that. Thought I was being sensitive. Said I'd finally matured. That word, matured, made something boil in me. As if my grief had been immature. As if crying over a fake miscarriage made me a child. I smiled and nodded. I'd been doing that a lot lately. On the night of her birthday, I cooked. Set the table. Lit candles. Played her favorite playlist. She showed up in a navy blue dress. Hair curled, lips painted red. She looked beautiful, but all I saw was a stranger. After dinner, I handed her the box. "This," I said, "is something I've been putting together for a while." She smiled, touched the ribbon, glanced up at me with those wide, fake innocent eyes. "You didn't have to." "I did," I said, and poured her another glass of wine. "Open it." Her hands trembled, just slightly, as she peeled back the paper. She stared at the flash drive for a few seconds, then looked up. "What is this?" "A memory," I said softly. "Something I want you to listen to. Alone." She didn't say anything. She just nodded. But I saw it. That flicker. That fear. She knew. Or at least, she suspected. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I had control. The next morning was eerily quiet. Clover usually filled the house with sound. Heels clicking on hardwood, blow dryer humming from the bathroom, Spotify playlists blasting something artsy and annoying. But that day, there was only silence. Heavy. Tense. I sat in the kitchen with a mug of coffee I didn't even sip, listening for movement upstairs. The flash drive was no longer on her nightstand. She'd seen it. She'd listened. I imagined her face when she heard the recordings. The laughter. The confession about the miscarriage. The name Zayden whispered like a secret prayer. She stayed in the bedroom until almost noon. When she finally came downstairs, her eyes were bloodshot. Not from sadness. From panic. She didn't say a word. Just stood there in the doorway, arms crossed, like she was trying to size me up. "You listened," I said. I didn't ask. I knew. Her lips twitched like she was about to lie. Then, for the first time in months, she didn't. "You had no right," she snapped. I almost laughed. No right. She said it like I'd been the one sneaking around, like I'd committed a betrayal. "I had every right," I replied. "You took something sacred and turned it into a performance. You faked a miscarriage, Clover. You lied to my face while I cried myself to sleep beside you." She didn't flinch. She just stared at me with that cold detachment she'd mastered over time. The same look she gave when she wanted to shut down a conversation. "I made a mistake." "No," I said, standing. "You made choices. Repeated, calculated choices. And you dragged me through grief just to cover your tracks." Her expression hardened. "What do you want, Lennox? Huh? You want me to fall on my knees and beg? You want me to cry again?" "No," I said, voice low. "I want you gone." She blinked. That one landed. "You're kicking me out. I'm asking you to leave before I show the contents of that flash drive to your boss. Your parents. Zayden's HR department." Her jaw dropped. "You wouldn't." "I would," I said, stepping closer. "I already uploaded everything to the cloud, and I'm one click away from sending it to everyone in your world. I'm done being the fool." Her voice cracked. Finally. I just didn't want to lose everything. You already did, I whispered. You just haven't realized it yet. She stormed out of the house without packing a single thing. No car keys. No purse. Just rage and shame wrapped in designer perfume. The door slammed so hard it rattled the picture frames. I stood there for a long time. Not triumphant. Not relieved. Just empty. Because as much as I wanted justice, revenge, closure, none of it brought back the version of me that had once believed in her. The man who dreamed of late-night feedings and first steps. That man was gone, buried under all the lies she thought she could get away with. And yet, I wasn't finished. She thought she'd seen the worst. But the next part? That was just for Zayden. 2 days after Clover stormed out, I stood outside a glass-walled office tower downtown, watching people stream in and out like ants. Briefcases, Bluetooth headsets, fake smiles. And then I saw him. Zayden Lockwood. The man who funded my wife's abortion. The man who made her laugh behind my back. The man who got a front-row seat to the crumbling of my marriage while I was still busy building a crib that would never be used. He looked just as I remembered. Tailored blazer, expensive shoes, phone glued to his ear like he was closing world-altering deals. Confident. Untouchable. But nobody's untouchable. I waited until he stepped into the coffee shop next door and followed him in. I wasn't loud. I wasn't aggressive. I just walked right up to his table and placed a sealed envelope in front of him. He looked up, confused. Can I help you? Probably not, I said, sitting across from him. But I'm pretty sure I can help you see something clearly. He raised an eyebrow. Who the hell are you? I smiled. I'm Clover's husband. And just like that, all the color drained from his smug little face. He sat back in his chair slowly, like gravity had suddenly tripled. Look, man, whatever she told you. I know everything. I interrupted, voice calm. I know about the affair. I know about the clinic. I know whose card was used. And I know that neither of you expected me to ever find out. He looked around nervously, like someone might be filming. This is really not the place to. It's the perfect place, I said, leaning in. Because this is the calm before the storm. He didn't open the envelope right away, so I kept going. You don't get to pretend this didn't happen. You don't get to go back to sipping cold brew and pretending you're some harmless office crush. You funded the abortion of a child my wife claimed was mine, and then helped her lie about it while I was grieving. He winced. Good. I wanted that. I'm not here to punch you. I'm not here to make a scene. I'm here to inform you that your company's board of directors will be receiving a packet tomorrow morning with that same envelope. Copies of receipts, voice recordings, even surveillance stills. I know how your firm feels about inappropriate intra-office conduct. His voice dropped. You'd ruin my career over. You already ruined my life. This is me just returning the favor. He opened the envelope, scanned the first few pages. I could see his hands trembling. Consider this your warning, I said, standing up. Clean up your mess. Stay out of mine. And if you ever contact Clover again, don't worry. I've got eyes everywhere now. I walked out before he could respond. The sun felt different on my face. Warmer, somehow. Like the weight of his smugness had finally been lifted off my chest. This wasn't revenge in the classic sense. I didn't destroy him with fists or fire. I used facts. The truth. The kind they couldn't spin, deny, or cry their way out of. And that was just the beginning. Because while Clover tried to run, I made sure she had nowhere left to hide. After confronting Zayden, I expected a ripple effect. But what followed was a full-blown collapse. It started with a phone call from one of Clover's co-workers, someone I'd only met once at a company holiday party. Her voice was hushed, shaky. Lennox, I shouldn't be calling, but Clover didn't show up to work today. There are rumors. People saw the emails. The recordings. Did you? I told the truth, I said simply. She exhaled, like that explained everything. By that afternoon, I was receiving texts from numbers I didn't recognize. Friends of hers. Colleagues. Even her sister, who once called me Lennox the Limp behind my back, sent a message. What did you do? She's having a breakdown. I didn't reply. Because here's the thing no one wants to admit. Sometimes breakdowns are the first honest moments people have. Clover had spent months building a narrative. The grieving wife. The victim. She weaponized my empathy, knowing I'd never push too hard. She counted on my softness to protect her secrets. But the minute the mask cracked, so did her control. She came back home that night. I didn't expect her to. I'd changed the locks, but she still had the garage code. I heard the click of heels on tile and found her standing in the kitchen, mascara smeared, hair frizzed from the rain, shoulders hunched like she'd aged 5 years in one day. You destroyed everything, she whispered. No, I replied calm. I just showed everyone who you really are. Her laugh was hollow, almost feral. You think you're some kind of hero? I don't need to be a hero. I just needed to stop being the fool. She paced, looked around like the furniture might offer her a place to hide. You made me out to be a monster, Lennox. I didn't have to try hard. You faked a miscarriage. Do you understand what that means? I held you while you pretended to mourn a child you chose to terminate. A child that wasn't even mine. And you let me spiral. Alone. She froze. For the first time, she looked truly small. Vulnerable. But not in a way that earned sympathy, just exposure. You want to know why I didn't tell you the truth? She snapped suddenly. Because you're too fragile. You always needed everything to be clean and simple. I didn't want to deal with your breakdown. My breakdown. I said, stunned. You watched me cry for a baby that never existed. You told me I should start therapy. And all the while, you were sleeping with a man whose name you didn't even bother to hide on the receipt. Her mouth opened, closed. No excuse came. You can't stay here, I said. I already filed for divorce. Papers will be served within the week. Your things are packed. The storage unit info is taped to the front door. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't move. Not this time. Lennox, please, she whispered. I lost control. I just wanted something that felt exciting. You were predictable. That one stung. Not because it wasn't true, but because she used my loyalty as a flaw. I stepped back. You didn't lose control, Clover. You steered straight into the crash. She didn't speak again. She just turned and walked out the door for the last time. And as it clicked shut behind her, I felt it. The grief was still there, but it was finally mine. Clean, honest, free of manipulation. But this wasn't the end. I had one more loose end to tie. The child that never existed had a story, and I was going to make sure everyone heard it. You can only be humiliated in silence for so long before the silence starts to rot you from the inside. I had spent months biting my tongue, swallowing every doubt, nodding along to a life that had already been set on fire behind my back. But now I had nothing left to lose. So I told the story, not to tabloids, not to strangers on Reddit. I told it to the people who actually mattered, the ones she'd manipulated most. Her family, her friends, the people she leaned on to paint me as cold and distant while she grieved. I started with her parents. They invited me over after hearing the rumors. I almost declined. I almost didn't care. But something in me wanted them to know. Not for revenge, but for reality. I didn't want to be remembered as the husband who couldn't be there for Clover during the hardest time of her life. So I brought a manila folder, sat in their living room, declined the tea, and laid the truth on their polished coffee table. Clover's mother opened it and gasped audibly. Her father went stiff as he scanned the receipts, the photos, the transcripts. Then came the recording, the one with her voice, crystal clear. No, he doesn't know a thing. He still thinks it was a miscarriage. You should have seen his face. Her mom's eyes filled with tears. Not the kind Clover faked. These were real. Devastated. Shaking hands. Silent sobs. I didn't come here for pity, I said softly. I just wanted you to know I wasn't crazy. I wasn't distant. I was grieving something that never existed. Her father looked like he wanted to speak, but words failed him. She told me I was too fragile for the truth. I added. But I wasn't. I was just too trusting. I left before they could apologize. I went down the list from there. Her sister, her best friend Kennedy, the one she always called her emotional twin, even her HR manager. Every person who had been a pawn in her performance. I showed them the same folder, gave them the same clarity. Most of them didn't say a word, but the looks on their faces, they said everything. Clover had counted on one thing, my silence. She thought I'd lick my wounds quietly while she moved on to a shinier, newer life. She never expected me to reclaim the truth. But that's the thing about the truth, it doesn't beg for attention. It just waits. And when it finally arrives, it doesn't scream. It ends things. I started sleeping again. Not well, but without waking up in a cold sweat. I started breathing deeper. I started feeling the floor beneath my feet again. The hardest part? Letting go of the child that never existed. I'd created a whole world in my head, holding their tiny hand, reading bedtime stories, dancing in the living room. Ellis. I still whispered the name sometimes. Not out of delusion, but out of love for the idea of what could have been. But I wouldn't let Clover ruin that, too. Ellis wasn't a lie to me. Ellis was a goodbye. And now, there was only one final step. My voice. My story. My turn. A few weeks after the storm settled, I found myself sitting alone on a park bench just past sunset. The same park where Clover and I once argued about baby names. The same place I'd imagined pushing a stroller, holding a tiny hand, building a future. Only now, there was no stroller. No Clover. Just me. And for the first time, that felt okay. I stared out at the pond, watching ducks ripple the water's surface. There was a calm I hadn't felt in months. Not because the pain was gone, but because it no longer ruled me. I told my story. I'd handed the truth to everyone who deserved it. And I'd finally accepted the hardest thing of all. Closure doesn't always come with a happy ending. Sometimes it comes with silence, peace, an empty bench, and a breeze that doesn't sting anymore. But that wasn't the end of my story. Not really. About a month later, I met someone. Her name was Fern. I know, it's an old soul kind of name. The kind you hear in novels or small-town bakeries. But that's exactly what she was. Steady, quiet in the right ways. The kind of person who listens without trying to fix you. We met at a secondhand bookstore. I was thumbing through a parenting book I couldn't bring myself to buy. She noticed. Said, "That one's a little outdated. Try the blue one on the next shelf. It's more honest." We talked for half an hour about books. Then coffee. Then everything else. I didn't tell her everything that day. But eventually I did. And when I told her about Ellis, my maybe baby, my goodbye sky dream, she didn't flinch. She just took my hand and said, "You still get to be a dad someday. And you'll be a great one. Because you already loved someone who didn't even exist." That sentence undid me in a way Clover never could. I won't pretend everything's perfect. Some wounds take longer than others. But each day feels a little lighter now. The air doesn't taste like betrayal anymore. It tastes like possibility. Clover? Last I heard, she moved to another city. Tried to reinvent herself. Zayden disappeared from her life not long after HR got the files. I don't know if she ever truly understood what she did to me. And maybe that's okay. Because this story was never really about her. It was about finding my voice in the ruins. It was about rebuilding, even when the foundation was scorched. It was about becoming me again. So, here's to the end that wasn't tragic. Here's to Ellis, the name I'll always carry with quiet reverence. And here's to Fern, who reminded me that even after devastation, there's still beauty, still life, still love. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss the next emotional twist. See you in the next one.